The gun barrel pressed cold against Ethan McAllister's temple. 3 men laughed in the firelight, their voices carrying the edge of men who had seen too much death to care about one more. The hammer clicked back. Ethan closed his eyes. Then a woman's voice cut through the night, speaking words in Apache that would change everything. But that moment lay 12 hours ahead. The story began that morning when the sun was still kind, and Ethan McAllister still believed he could live out his days in peace. 12 hours earlier, October 15, 1878, Sulphur Springs Valley stretched out like hammered copper under the early light, every stone and scrub bush throwing long shadows across the alkaline dirt. Ethan sat his horse on a low rise, studying the tracks in the dust. 3 head of cattle his cattle had wandered south during the night. The prince led straight toward the disputed zone, that lawless strip of land where neither Fort Bowie nor the Apache bands claimed authority. He should have turned back. A smart man would have written off 3 cows rather than crossed into territory where both sides shot first and buried the questions with the bodies. But Ethan McAllister had spent 2 years building a life on 40 acres of hardscrabble ranch land, and every animal mattered. 3 cows meant the difference between making it through winter or losing everything. He touched his heels to the mare's flanks and followed the tracks south. The land changed as he rode. The scattered mesquite gave way to ocotillo and prickly pear, the ground rising in subtle swells that hid arroyos deep enough to break a horse's leg. Ethan read the terrain the way other men read newspapers, his eyes catching details that most would miss. The bent grass, the disturbed stones, the 2 quiet birds. 20 minutes into the disputed zone, he saw the ambush before it closed. 6 riders materialized from a dry wash to his left, their horses fresh and their weapons ready. Apache, but not from any band Ethan recognized. These men wore a mixture of traditional buckskin and stolen army gear, their faces hard, with the look of men who lived between worlds and belonged to neither. The leader raised a rifle. Ethan's hand moved toward his Colt, then stopped. 6 against 1. The arithmetic of survival was simple. "Off the horse," the leader said in accented English. "Slow." Ethan dismounted, hands visible. The leader circled him, eyes sharp and evaluating. He was perhaps 35, with a scar that ran from his left ear to his collarbone, and a bearing that spoke of military training, not traditional Apache raiding tactics. This was something else. "You scout?" the leader asked. "You track for bluecoats." "I'm a rancher," Ethan said, keeping his voice level. "Haven't worn a uniform in 2 years." "Liar." The leader leaned close, studying Ethan's hands, his posture, the way he held himself. "I see how you watch. You read this country like scout." 2 warriors grabbed Ethan's arms, binding his wrists with rawhide that bit deep. They stripped him of his weapons, his hat, his canteen, everything but his boots and the clothes on his back. The leader examined Ethan's Colt revolver with appreciation, turning it in the light. "Good weapon," he said. "You cavalry issue," Ethan said nothing. The leader smiled, showing teeth. "We take you to camp, trade you. Maybe someone pay good for white scout." They bound Ethan to a lead rope and started south deeper into the Badlands. The leader rode ahead, occasionally speaking to his men in rapid Apache. Ethan understood every word but kept his face blank, storing the information. They were headed to Skeleton Canyon, a gathering place. Neutral ground where renegades from different bands came to trade stolen goods and plan raids. These men worked for someone they called the boss, someone who paid in rifles and ammunition. The implications settled in Ethan's gut like cold lead. This wasn't random raiding. This was organized, funded, directed by someone with resources and a plan. 3 hours later, they descended into Skeleton Canyon. The camp spread across a natural amphitheater where high rock walls provided cover from cavalry patrols. 30 warriors, maybe more, from 3 or 4 different bands. Ethan saw Chiricahua, Mescalero, even a few Jicarilla, all groups that normally kept separate. but here they mingled around cook fires, inspecting rifles laid out on blankets, arguing over the price of stolen horses. No women, no children, no elders. This was a military operation, not a village. They tied Ethan to a post in the center of camp. The rawhide cut into his wrists, and the tension in his shoulders forced him to shift every few minutes to keep the blood flowing. Sweat mixed with trail dust on his face, and the left side of his jaw still ached from where one of the warriors had struck him during the ride. He kept his breathing even, his face neutral. Panic would mark him as weak. Fear would give them entertainment. So he stood quiet and watched cataloging faces and weapons, counting sentries and mapping escape routes that probably didn't exist. The sun climbed toward noon. The heat pressed down like a physical weight. Ethan's tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth, but he didn't ask for water. Around him, the business of the camp continued. Men haggled over rifles. A horse changed hands. Someone laughed too loud and started a brief scuffle that ended when the leader, the one who had captured Ethan, shouted them down. Then, as the sun tipped past its peak, the camp went quiet. A woman walked into the clearing from the north ridge, alone. She was Apache, perhaps 29 or 30, with the long stride of someone used to covering distance on foot. Tall for a woman, nearly 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of strength earned through labor and combat. She wore a buckskin shirt that had seen hard use, a long skirt heavy with trail dust, and moccasins that made no sound on the rocky ground. Her hair hung loose to her shoulders, strands caught in the wind and sunlight. But it was the way she carried herself that made Ethan take notice. No hesitation, no fear. She walked into a camp of 30 armed men like she owned the ground beneath her feet. The warriors recognized her. Ethan saw it in the sudden tension, the way conversation stopped mid-sentence. Some men stepped back, others whispered. One man made a sign against evil. She carried a small leather pouch in her left hand. Her right hand stayed loose, ready. Her eyes swept the camp in a single practice scan, cataloging threats and positions. When her gaze passed over Ethan, she paused for perhaps 2 heartbeats, studying him with an intensity that felt like being weighed and measured. Then she walked to where the leader stood and spoke 3 words in Apache. "I need trade." The leader, the man called Cowboy, looked at her with something between respect and wariness. "Naichi," he said, and Ethan filed the name away. "Your brother hunts you. Foolish to come here." "My brother hunts me everywhere," she replied in English, her accent slight. "Here I can trade. There I can only run." Cowboy gestured at the goods spread on blankets. "What you need?" Naichi turned and looked directly at Ethan. "Him." The camp exploded in laughter. Warriors slapped their thighs and called out suggestions, each cruder than the last. The idea of this woman wanting to trade for a white prisoner struck them as the finest joke they had heard in weeks. But Naichi's face didn't change. She stood silent, waiting for the laughter to die. When it did, Cowboy shook his head. "He's nothing. White dog, maybe scout, maybe not." "Why waste trade?" "My business," Naichi said. "You want trade or not?" Cowboy shrugged his eyes, calculating. "Auction. You bid with others." He turned to the camp and announced in Apache that the white prisoner was for sale. The first offer came from a warrior holding a worn saddle blanket. The second from someone waving a chipped metal bowl. The crowd laughed harder. They weren't buying a person. They were buying entertainment, the chance to see what the white man would do when his new owner decided his fate. Ethan's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes on the middle distance, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. Then Naichi opened her pouch. She moved deliberately, drawing out each item and placing it on the ground in front of Cowboy. First, a beaded armband, the beadwork intricate and old, the kind passed down through generations. Second, a turquoise necklace, each stone perfectly matched the work of months. Third, a bone-handled knife with symbols carved into the handle, ceremonial and clearly precious. The laughter died. Every warrior in camp knew the value of what she had laid down. This wasn't a joke bid. This was everything she owned. Goyawe picked up the knife, turning it in the light. His eyes narrowed. "These are Chief's possessions," he said quietly. "Where you get these, they were my father's," Naichi said. "Now they are yours, for him." She pointed at Ethan. For a long moment, Goyawe said nothing. Then he nodded, pocketing the items with quick, greedy movements. "Cut him loose," he ordered. Two warriors approached with knives. The rawhide binding Ethan's wrists fell away, and blood rushed back into his hands with needle-sharp pain. He brought his arms forward slowly, fighting the urge to collapse. The warriors shoved him toward Naichi, but she stepped between them, and Ethan blocking the push with her body. She didn't touch him, but her stance made it clear the transaction was complete. He was hers now, under her protection. Ethan looked at her directly for the first time. Up close, he could see the details the distance had hidden. The scar that ran from her right shoulder down to her wrist, white and old. The bruising on her ribs visible where her shirt had torn. The cuts on her hands, defensive wounds from recent combat. This woman had been fighting for her life, probably for days, and she had just traded everything she owned for a stranger. "Come," she said quietly in English. "We leave now." Ethan hesitated. Every instinct screamed questions. Who was she? Why had she bought him? What did she want? But the alternative was staying tied to that post, waiting for someone to decide his fate with a bullet or a blade. He followed her. They walked through the camp past warriors who watched with expressions ranging from amusement to contempt. Naichi led him to the north edge where a narrow trail climbed up through the rocks. She moved quickly, not running but covering ground with the efficient pace of someone used to long distances. When they were 100 yards from camp out of sight, in a jumble of boulders, she stopped, turned, looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death to waste time on lies. "You speak Apache," she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan blinked. "What makes you think that you understood Goya Awe? I see your eyes change when he speaks. You hear, you understand, but you hide." She tilted her head. "You were cavalry, scout. You lived with my people." There was no point in denying what she had already figured out. Ethan nodded. "3rd Cavalry, Fort Bowie, 1869 to 1876. They dishonorably discharged me. Why, I wouldn't follow an order to murder women and children." Naichi studied him for another long moment, then nodded as if confirming something she had already suspected. "I buy you for reason," she said. "I need help. I need man who knows both worlds, Apache and white. I need man who can fight and think." She paused. "I need man who is not afraid of me." "I'm not afraid of you." "Good." She turned and started walking again. "Because tonight you will be my husband." Ethan stopped. "What?" Naichi looked back over her shoulder. "Protection. They see woman alone, they take. They see woman with man, they think twice. You owe me life. You give me protection. That's not how marriage works. Apache marriage works how we say it works." Her eyes hardened. "I save you. You save me. This is deal. You want different deal, go back to post." Ethan looked back toward the camp where smoke rose from cook fires and men laughed over stolen goods. He looked at the woman in front of him, bruised and scarred and carrying herself like someone who had forgotten how to be anything but strong. "Where are we going?" he asked. "West. Into Dragoon Mountains. Find safe place. Then I tell you everything. And if I run, then you run." She shrugged. "But you will not. You are not running man. You are standing man. I see this in you." She started walking again, and after a moment, Ethan followed. They traveled until sunset, moving through terrain that grew increasingly rugged. Naichi set a pace that was just shy of punishing, stopping only when darkness made the trail too dangerous to navigate. She chose a spot in a shallow depression, surrounded by rocks sheltered from wind and hidden from casual observation. With practiced efficiency, She gathered dead wood and built a small fire, the flames barely visible from 10 feet away. From her remaining supplies, she produced dried meat and cactus fruit, dividing them into 2 equal portions without hesitation. They ate in silence. The food was tough and bitter, but it was the first thing Ethan had eaten since dawn. When the meal was finished, Naichi pulled out a battered canteen and offered it to him first. The gesture surprised him. In Apache culture, the provider ate and drank first. By giving him priority, she was signaling something: trust, or perhaps testing to see if he understood the significance. He took a small drink and handed it back. "Thank you." Naichi drank, then capped the canteen. "You have questions? Ask." Where to start? Ethan settled on the most immediate concern. "Who's hunting you?" "My brother, Koda." She said the name like a curse. "He killed my father. Now he hunt me." "Why?" Naichi poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks drift into the darkness. "My father was Chief Nantan. Chiricahua banned 200 people. He was good chief. Keep peace with Fort Bowie, keep people fed, keep our ways." She paused. 6 months ago, he died. Sudden. They say old age, but he was strong week before. Hunt with me, no sickness. "You think it was murder?" "I know it was murder." Naichi pulled up her sleeve, revealing more bruising and a series of cuts that looked defensive. "I tell tribal council. I say symptoms match hemlock poison. Father teach me plants. I know poison when I see it." Her jaw tightened. "But Koda has counsel now. His men. They say I am crazy with grief. They say I dishonor father's memory." "So you ran." "I run to find proof." She met his eyes across the fire. "Koda killed father for power. Now he hunt me because I know. If I die, no one questions. He stays chief. He does what he wants with our people." Ethan absorbed this, pieces clicking together. "The raid 5 weeks ago. Apache Pass. 4 settlers dead." "You know this. Heard about it at Fort Bowie before I left." He leaned forward. "Cavalry blamed the Chiricahua." Naichi's expression went flat and cold. "Koda blame me. Say I lead raid to start war. Say I am renegade, danger to tribe." She laughed bitterly. "I was hunting 2 days north when raid happened. Alone, no witness. Perfect for Koda." "He set you up." "Yes. Make me criminal. Make my death justified." She wrapped her arms around her knees. "So I run. 6 men come for me 3 days ago. I killed 2 wound, 1 run from rest. They find me again tomorrow, maybe day after. Always they find me." Ethan studied the woman across from him. The bruises, the cuts, the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. She had been fighting alone for months, and the weight of it was breaking her down, piece by piece. "Why buy me?" he asked. "You could have traded those items for horses, supplies, weapons. Why waste them on a prisoner?" Naichi was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he had heard before. "I watch you in camp. 3 hours you stand in sun. They hit you, you do not beg. They laugh, you do not break. You watch everything, learn everything, stay ready." She looked at him. "You are survivor, fighter, thinker. These men hunting me, they are warriors, strong, fast, many. I cannot beat them alone. But maybe with help from man who stands when others break, maybe I have chance." It was the most honest answer Ethan had heard in years. No manipulation, no false promises. Just a desperate woman making a calculated gamble with the last resources she had. "And the husband part?" he asked. "Still just for protection?" Naichi shrugged. "Need is real. Feeling we see. Right now we need each other. Tomorrow maybe we need each other more. Maybe we need each other less. But tonight we are together. This is enough." Ethan should have walked away. He had spent 2 years avoiding exactly this kind of complication, this kind of danger. But something in Naichi's eyes, in the set of her shoulders, in the way she refused to apologize for needing help, made him stay. "I'll keep first watch," he said. "You sleep." "Why, you trust me? I could kill you in sleep. Take what little you have." "You already paid more for my life than it's worth. If you wanted me dead, you wouldn't have wasted the trade." He settled back against a rock. "Besides, you said it yourself. We need each other." Naichi studied him for another moment, then nodded. She lay down near the fire, positioning herself so she could see him and the approaches to their camp. Even in rest, she stayed ready. Ethan watched the darkness beyond the firelight, listening to the night sounds of the desert. Somewhere out there, men were hunting the woman who slept 5 feet away from him. Somewhere out there, a conspiracy was unfolding that involved stolen rifles and murdered chiefs and land grabs worth more than human lives. 12 hours ago, he had been tracking lost cattle. Now, he was bound to a woman who had traded everything for his freedom, a woman who needed him to help her fight a battle she couldn't win alone. The gun barrel pressed cold against his temple. That moment was still hours away, but Ethan could feel it coming, could feel the weight of choices already made and consequences already in motion. He fed another stick to the fire and settled in to wait for whatever the dawn would bring. Dawn came cold and blue across the Dragoon Mountains. Ethan woke to Naichi's hand on his shoulder, her grip firm and urgent. Her eyes were wide, focused on something beyond the rocks that sheltered their camp. "Riders," she whispered. 2, maybe 3. "Coming from east." He was on his feet in seconds, the stiffness from sleeping on hard ground forgotten. The fire had burned down to ash. Naichi was already moving, gathering their few supplies with practiced efficiency. No wasted motion, no panic. Just the smooth coordination of someone who had done this too many times before. They left the camp in under 2 minutes, heading west into terrain that grew steeper with every step. Naichi led, choosing paths that wound between boulders and through narrow gaps in the rock. Behind them, Ethan could hear the faint sounds of horses, distant but growing closer. He watched Naichi work as they moved. Every 50 yards, she stopped and used a branch to brush away their footprints, disturbing the ground just enough to confuse the trail without making it obvious someone had been there. She avoided loose stones that might shift and leave marks. She chose paths through harder ground where tracks wouldn't show. This was not luck. This was training. Years of it. After 30 minutes of hard climbing, they reached a ridge that offered a view back toward their camp. Ethan caught a glimpse of 3 riders circling the cold fire pit, one of them dismounting to study the ground. Apache warriors moving with the purposeful patience of men on a hunt. Naichi pulled him back from the ridgeline before they could be spotted. They continued west, dropping into a ravine that provided cover. The morning sun climbed higher, turning the rocks into radiating ovens. Sweat soaked through Ethan's shirt, and his ribs ached from the exertion, but Naichi set a pace that didn't allow for complaint. 50 yards ahead of her, Ethan saw his opportunity. A fork in the ravine. Left led deeper into the mountains. Right curved back toward more open country, toward civilization, toward escape. He could take it. Naichi was behind him, focused on watching their back trail. By the time she realized he was gone, he could have a 10-minute head start. He slowed, studying the right fork. Freedom, safety. His ranch might be gone, burned by Koda's men, but he could rebuild somewhere else. Start over, again. Movement behind him made him turn. Naichi had stumbled, her hand pressed against her ribs where the bruising was darkest. She caught herself against the ravine wall, breathing hard. For just a moment the mask of strength slipped, and Ethan saw the truth underneath. She was hurt, exhausted, running on nothing but will. The choice crystallized in that moment. He could run, save himself, leave her to fight alone against men who would show no mercy, or he could stay, help her, maybe die trying. Ethan walked back to where Naichi leaned against the stone. "Here," he said, offering his arm. "Lean on me. We'll move faster together." Naichi looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. In that expression, Ethan saw how rare kindness had become in her life, how long it had been since anyone had offered help without demanding payment. She took his arm. They walked west together, her weight on his shoulder, moving as one. 2 hours later, they found a creek hidden in a fold of the foothills. The water ran clear and cold, pooling in natural basins worn smooth by centuries of flow. Cottonwood trees provided shade, and the high walls of the ravine offered protection. It was as safe a place as they were likely to find. Nietzsche collapsed beside the water, scooping handfuls to her mouth. Ethan drank his fill, then wet his shirt and used it to cool his face and neck. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. They sat in silence for several minutes, just breathing, letting their bodies recover. Finally, Nietzsche spoke. "What is your name, real name, not just white man name?" "Ethan McAllister. Used to be Sergeant McAllister, 3rd Cavalry, Fort Bowie." Nietzsche went very still. When she looked at him, her expression had changed, hardened. "You are Bluecoat." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Was Ethan corrected? "Not anymore. They threw me out 2 years ago. Why should I believe you?" "Maybe you lie. Maybe you work for them, still lead them to me." "If I was leading them to you, I had a dozen chances to signal our position this morning. I didn't." He met her eyes. "You asked why I left the cavalry. You want the truth, or you want to keep suspecting?" Nietzsche studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Tell me." So he did. "I enlisted in 1869, 21 years old, looking for purpose after my father died. Fort Bowie seemed like the place to find it. The cavalry was the law out here, the only law. I believed in that." He paused, remembering the young man he had been, so certain, so stupid. Made sergeant by 24. Good at tracking, good at reading terrain, good at keeping my head when things went bad. "What changed?" Nietzsche asked. 1871, Camp Grant. You know this?" Her face went dark. "I know. 144 Apache killed, mostly women, children. My father lost cousins there." "I wasn't part of it," Ethan said quickly. "I was stationed at Fort Bowie when it happened. But I saw the aftermath, saw the bodies brought in, saw how the officers talked about it like it was a military victory." He swallowed hard. "I threw up for 3 days straight. Couldn't sleep for weeks after. Kept seeing their faces." Nietzsche's expression softened slightly. "You have conscience, rare for Bluecoat. Maybe. But having a conscience and acting on it are different things. For 4 more years I followed orders. Told myself I was one of the good ones because I didn't personally kill women and children. As if not participating was the same as stopping it." He told her about 1875. How the Army had assigned him as liaison to Chief Nantan's band, part of a fragile peace treaty. How he had lived 4 months with her people, learning the language, learning the customs, learning that everything he had been told about Apache savagery was a lie designed to justify theft and murder. "Your father saved my life," Ethan said. "Rattlesnake bit me while we were hunting. Venom had already spread before I even knew I was hit. Nantan cut the wound open, sucked out the poison-used medicines I'd never seen before. Sat with me for 2 days while the fever burned through me." He looked at Nietzsche. "He didn't have to do that. I was just some white soldier sent to spy on his people. But he saved me anyway." "Father saw good in people," Nietzsche said quietly, "even when they did not deserve it. He saw something in me that I didn't see in myself." Ethan picked up a stone, turning it over in his hands. "When I went back to Fort Bowie, I wrote reports about the band, peaceful, no threat, following the treaty. But by 1876 there was a new commander, Major William Cutler, hard-liner, believed the only good Apache was a dead Apache." The name hit Nietzsche like a physical blow. "Cutler, he is the one who meets with Coda now." "What?" "My brother. He meets with cavalry officer 3-4 times in last 2 months. I hear this from people who still loyal to father." She leaned forward. "You know this man?" "I know him." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He gave me an order in 76. Attack your father's band. Said there was intelligence about a weapons stockpile, about planning for raids. I'd been there. I knew it was a lie. 40 women, 25 children, 15 warriors. It wasn't a military target. It was a massacre waiting to happen. You refused. In front of my entire unit. Told Cutler his intelligence was fabricated. Told him I wouldn't lead men to murder innocents. Ethan laughed bitterly. He had me arrested that same day, court-martialed for disobedience in the field, dishonorably discharged, stripped of rank pay pension, everything. Nietzsche watched him carefully. Why risk everything for people not your own? Because your father showed me that people are people, that honor matters more than orders, that some lines, once you cross them, you can never come back from. He met her eyes. I'd rather lose everything than become the kind of man who could live with that blood on his hands. For a long time, Nietzsche said nothing. Then she reached out and touched his hand, brief and light. My father spoke of you, she said. After you left, he tells stories. Red brother who choose honor. He say you were good man even though you were white, even though you were blue coat. He say someday our people need more men like you. The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He had spent 2 years believing Nantan had forgotten him, that their time together had been just another assignment meaningless in the long chain of betrayals that defined the frontier. To learn that he had been remembered, spoken of with respect, mattered in ways he couldn't articulate. I didn't know, was all he could manage. Father never forgot friend, Nietzsche said, or enemy. They sat in silence, the weight of shared history settling between them. Ethan understood now why Nietzsche had recognized something in him at the renegade camp. She hadn't been buying a random prisoner. She had been claiming an ally her father had identified years before. The afternoon stretched on. They rested in the shade, rationing the last of their food and water. Nietzsche told him more about the past 6 months, about Koda's subtle transformation from grieving brother to ambitious tyrant, about the warriors who had disappeared when they questioned his authority, about the meetings with cavalry officers that no one was supposed to know about. 5 weeks ago, she said, there was raid, Apache Pass. Wagon train attacked 4 settlers killed. Cavalry say it was Chiricahua, say it was our band. I heard about that before I left civilization, Ethan said. They were talking about sending a punitive expedition. Koda used it. Say I led the raid. Say I want war with white men. Say I am danger to tribe. Her hands clenched. I was hunting 2 days north when raid happened. Alone. No witness to prove where I was. Convenient. Yes, very convenient for Koda. She looked at him. That man Goyawe who hold you prisoner. He worked for my brother. He lead the raid at Apache Pass. Kill those settlers on Koda's order. Ethan's mind raced through the implications. The rifles they had. Those weren't stolen from some random wagon. That was military issue, new manufacture. Someone's supplying them regularly. You saw this? I was cavalry for 7 years. I know Army equipment when I see it. Those weapons came from a military supply depot. That kind of theft doesn't happen by accident. Someone on the inside is providing them. Cutler, Nietzsche said. Has to be. He's the Fort Bowie commander, controls the arsenal, the supply wagons, everything. Ethan stood pacing. Your brother kills your father, takes control of the band. Then he partners with Cutler. They stage raids to justify military action. Cutler gets to claim he's protecting settlers. Your brother gets weapons and money. And you're in the way because you know the truth. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture uglier than either of them had imagined. This wasn't just about tribal politics or family betrayal. This was a conspiracy that reached into the United States Army itself. A sound from the ridge above froze them both. Voices, speaking Apache, close. Ethan and Nietzsche moved as one, pressing themselves against the ravine wall where shadows offered concealment. 2 warriors appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. They were studying the ground, looking for tracks. One of them shouted down in Apache, Nietzsche, we know you are near. Give up the white man and come home. Your brother wants only to talk. Nietzsche's hand moved to the knife at her belt. Ethan grabbed her wrist, shaking his head. 2 against 2 might be even odds, but the gunfire would draw every warrior in the area. Nietzsche, the warrior called again. You cannot run forever. Come back before you bring shame to father's memory. Ethan felt Naichi tense beside him, rage and grief warring across her face. He knew what she was thinking. She could surrender, give herself up, face whatever false justice Coda had prepared, maybe save Ethan's life in the bargain. Then she shouted back, her voice carrying clear and strong across the ravine. "My father's daughter does not surrender to liars and murderers. Tell Coda, if he wants me, he will have to kill me himself." The warriors on the ridge exchanged glances. One raised his rifle. The shot cracked off stone 3 feet from Ethan's head. He dove left, pulling Naichi with him. Return fire came from above, bullets sparking off the rocks around them. They ran deeper into the ravine, using the terrain for cover. Behind them, the warriors shouted to each other, coordinating their pursuit. Ethan heard horses, more voices. The 2 warriors weren't alone. Reinforcements were coming. The ravine narrowed ahead, becoming a slot canyon barely wide enough for a single person. Naichi squeezed through first. Ethan followed the stone walls, pressing against his shoulders. Behind them, the warriors reached the entrance. One tried to follow, but his broader shoulders wouldn't fit. He cursed and pulled back. 50 yards further, the slot canyon opened into a small cave, natural shelter carved by ancient water. Naichi collapsed against the far wall, breathing hard. Blood ran down her arm from where a bullet had grazed her. Ethan tore a strip from his shirt and bound the wound. It was shallow, but it had been close. Too close. "You could have given me up," he said. "Saved yourself." "And let them kill you," Naichi shook her head. "You stay when you could run this morning. I fight when I could surrender this afternoon. We are even." Ethan smiled despite the circumstances. "Yeah, even." They sat in the cave as the sun began its descent, listening to the warriors searching the ravines outside. The voices eventually faded, moving north. For now, they were safe. As darkness gathered, a voice called from outside the cave, but this time it spoke English. "Ethan McAllister, still getting yourself into trouble, I see." Ethan's hand went to his knife. Then he recognized the voice. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. "Dutch." A figure appeared at the cave entrance, hands raised and empty. 61 years old, weathered like old leather, missing his left eye, but moving with the confidence of a man who knew these mountains better than most knew their own homes. Dutch Carter, former cavalry tracker, the best scout Ethan had ever known. "In the flesh," Dutch said. "Mind if I come in, or are you going to make an old man stand out here all night?" Ethan motioned him forward. Dutch entered the cave, his good eye taking in Naichi with a single evaluating glance. Then, to Ethan's surprise, he spoke in Apache. "Nantan's daughter. Heard you were dead. Glad the rumors were wrong." Naichi straightened. "You knew my father. Knew him. Respected him. He saved my life once, years back. I've been living with my Apache wife up in these hills ever since I quit the cavalry. Ishta, she's Nantan's younger sister. Your aunt." The revelation shifted something in Naichi's expression. "Aunt Ishta, married white scout. Father speak of this. You are the one who left cavalry to be with her." "That's right. The army didn't much like it, but I didn't much care what the army liked." Dutch settled onto a rock. "Ishta's cousin works at Fort Bowie. She heard things. Coda meeting with cavalry officers, bounty on your head, 20 horses and 10 rifles for whoever brings you back alive." He looked at Ethan. "When I heard Ethan McAllister was involved, I figured you'd need help." "How did you find us?" Ethan asked. "Tracked you since you left Skeleton Canyon. Waited to see if you were working together or if she'd just bought herself a hostage." Dutch grinned. That little speech back at the ravine settled the question. Naichi leaned forward. "What else you hear about Coda?" Dutch's expression went serious. "More than you want to know, and less than we need. Your brother's in deep with Major Cutler. Ishta's cousin saw them meeting 3 times in the last 2 months. 4th meeting scheduled for 8 days from now, day after your trial." "Trial?" Ethan asked. "Coda's called a tribal council in 8 days. Says Naichi must appear to answer charges. If she doesn't show automatic guilty verdict. If she does show councils stacked with his men, either way she's convicted as a renegade." Dutch pulled out a canteen and took a long drink. "But that's not the worst of it." What could be worse than kangaroo court? Nietzsche demanded. Dutch looked at them both. It's not just about you, Nietzsche. Cutler wants your band's land. Railroad companies offered him $75,000 under the table if he can clear the Chiricahua from the territory. Coda gets his cut. You're just in the way of a very profitable deal. The words hung in the cave like smoke. Ethan felt the last pieces of the puzzle slot into place. This wasn't about family rivalry or tribal politics. This was about money, land. The same story that had been repeating across the West for decades, written in blood and broken treaties. $75,000, Nietzsche said quietly. That is what my people's home is worth to them. To men like Cutler and your brother, it's worth everything, Dutch said. To the people who'll actually live there, who'll build their lives there, it's worth nothing. Just numbers in a ledger. Ethan stood, his mind already working through options. We need evidence. Something concrete that ties Cutler to Coda. Something that proves the raids were false flag operations. We need more than that, Nietzsche said. We need witness. Someone who saw Coda poison my father. Someone council will believe. Taza, Dutch said. The medicine man. He's hiding in the Chiricahua stronghold. Scared to death of Coda, but he was there when Nantan died. If anyone knows what really happened, it's him. Can we reach him before the trial? Ethan asked. If we move fast and stay ahead of Coda's hunters. Dutch looked at Nietzsche. There's more. Ishta says your father left a will, written document Apache and English, naming you as his chosen successor. Taza's supposed to have it. Nietzsche's breath caught. Father wrote this down, in words white men can read. He knew Coda would try to take power. He wanted to make sure there was proof of his wishes that couldn't be denied. Dutch stood. But we've got 8 days to find Taza, get his testimony and the will, and make it back to the council grounds. That's 2 days to reach the stronghold, 1 day to convince Taza to help, 2 days back, 3 days to prepare. No room for mistakes. What about the evidence against Cutler? Ethan asked. Working on it. I've got contacts, people who owe me favors. If there's paperwork, supply records, anything that shows military equipment going to renegades, I'll find it. Dutch looked between them. But I need you two to survive long enough to use it. Nietzsche stood, her decision made. We go to Stronghold. We find Taza. We bring truth to council. And Cutler? Ethan asked. One enemy at a time, Nietzsche said. First Coda, then the man who helps him. Dutch nodded approval. Smart. Divide and conquer. He pulled out a leather pouch. Ishta sent supplies. Food, ammunition, medicine. Not much, but enough to get you started. As Dutch distributed the supplies, Ethan felt the weight of what they were undertaking settle onto his shoulders. 8 days to expose a conspiracy, clear Nietzsche's name, and stop a land grab that would destroy 200 people's lives. 8 days to fight against men with resources, power, and no conscience. One more thing, Dutch said. Cutler's hired bounty hunters, 3 of them professionals out of Tucson. Calhoun and his crew. They're tracking you right now, probably half a day behind. How much is the bounty? Ethan asked. $200 for Nietzsche, alive or dead. Dutch looked at Ethan. They'll just kill for free if you get in the way. Nietzsche reached out and took Ethan's hand. The gesture was simple but profound, a statement. They were in this together now. Whatever came next, they would face it as allies. We rest tonight, Nietzsche said. Dawn we start for Stronghold. Dutch stood to leave. I'll keep Ishta's network watching Coda and Cutler. Any changes, I'll get word to you. He paused at the cave entrance. Nantan was a good man, a good chief. He deserved better than poison in the dark. You finish this, Nietzsche, you honor his memory right. I will, she said. For father, for my people, for truth. After Dutch disappeared into the night, Ethan and Nietzsche sat together in the darkness. The fire had burned low, providing barely enough light to see each other's faces. You still can leave, Nietzsche said quietly. This fight, it is not yours. You bought my freedom with everything you owned, Ethan replied. You trusted me when you had no reason to. You could have traded those items for supplies, weapons, a dozen other things more useful than one broken-down cavalry scout, but you chose me." He looked at her. "This fight became mine the moment you made that choice." Nietzsche was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned against his shoulder just slightly, just enough to share warmth in the cooling night. "Red Brother," she said, using the name her father had given him. Maybe Father knew? Maybe he saw this coming? Saw I would need someone who understood both worlds. Maybe, Ethan agreed, or maybe we just got lucky. Apache do not believe in luck. We believe in purpose. Then what's our purpose? Nietzsche looked up at the stars visible through the cave opening. To fight. To survive. To show that honor is stronger than greed. She closed her eyes. And maybe to show that two people from different worlds can stand together when it matters most. Ethan let her words settle, feeling the truth in them. Tomorrow they would start for the stronghold. Tomorrow the real battle would begin. But tonight they had this moment, this quiet space, where two broken people, thrown together by violence and desperation, chose to become something more than the sum of their wounds. Outside, the desert night sang its ancient songs. Inside the cave, Ethan McAllister and Nietzsche, daughter of Chief Nantan, rested together. Allies, partners. Two souls bound by choice, facing impossible odds with nothing but conviction and each other. Tomorrow, they would start for the stronghold. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. The reckoning was coming, and they would face it as one. They left before dawn, when the desert still held the night's cold, and the sky showed only the faintest promise of light. Dutch had gone ahead to scout the route, leaving Ethan and Nietzsche to follow paths he had marked with subtle signs that only trained eyes could read. A stone placed just so, a branch bent at a specific angle, the language of trackers written in the wilderness itself. The journey to Cochise stronghold would take 2 days if everything went right. Ethan knew from experience that nothing ever went right. They traveled through country that grew increasingly hostile with every mile. The gentle foothills gave way to broken terrain where ancient volcanic activity had thrust the earth into jagged formations, box canyons that could become death traps, ridges that offered no cover, dry washes that could fill with flash floodwater in minutes if the distant clouds decided to open. Nietzsche led when the terrain favored Apache knowledge. Ethan took point when the land required cavalry tactics. They moved as a unit now, their separate skills blending into something more effective than either could achieve alone. When Nietzsche's ribs began to trouble her after 3 hours of climbing, Ethan slowed the pace without being asked. When his cavalry boots started to fail on loose scree, she showed him how to place his feet the Apache way, distributing weight differently. By midday they had covered 12 miles, not fast but steady, sustainable. They rested in the shadow of a massive boulder that had fallen from the cliffs above sometime in the forgotten past. Nietzsche rationed out jerky and hardtack from Dutch's supplies. The food was bland and tough, but it was fuel, nothing more needed. "Tell me about Stronghold," Ethan said, chewing slowly. "I've heard stories, but I've never been there." Nietzsche's expression softened slightly, the hard edge of constant vigilance giving way to something almost like nostalgia. "Father bring me there when I was 10 summers old. Say every Apache should know the sacred places, the places where the stone itself remembers our people." She gestured toward the mountains ahead. Cochise made it his fortress when the white men came. Natural maze, one way in many ways to hide no way for cavalry to follow. He held it for years against whole army. And Taza lives there alone. Taza goes there when he needs to think, to pray, to remember. After Father died, after Kota takes control, Taza become afraid. He see what Kota is, but he is old, cannot fight. So he hides in the one place Kota will not go. Why won't Kota go there? Nietzsche's smile was bitter. Because Kota fears the old ways, the spirits, the memory of true chiefs. He is modern man, he say, believes in rifles and money, not in sacred stone. This makes him weak. They finished eating and moved on. The afternoon sun beat down without mercy, turning the rocks into furnaces and the air into something that had to be fought for with every breath. Ethan's shirt was soaked through with sweat. Naiche's face had gone pale under her bronze skin, but she pushed forward. 3 hours before sunset, they reached the outer approaches to the stronghold. The land changed character here, becoming a labyrinth of stone corridors and hidden passages. Water had carved these formations over millennia, creating a natural fortress that seemed designed by military engineers, but was instead the work of patient geology. Naiche paused at the entrance to a narrow defile, her hand raised. Ethan stopped immediately, following her gaze. She was reading something in the landscape, some sign he couldn't see. "Someone watches," she said quietly. "Hostile, cannot tell. But they let us approach. This is good sign." She cupped her hands and called out in Apache, her voice echoing off the stone walls. The words were formal, ritualistic, a greeting, Ethan realized, the proper way to approach a sacred place. For a long moment, nothing. Then a figure appeared on a ledge 30 feet above them, ancient, bent with age, but moving with the careful precision of someone who knew every step of this terrain. Taza. The medicine man studied them from above, his weathered face unreadable. When he spoke, his voice carried surprising strength. "Nantan's daughter returns, and she brings the Red Brother." The words were Apache, but Ethan understood them perfectly. "I have waited. The Spirit said you would come." Naiche and Ethan followed Taza through passages so narrow they had to turn sideways, climbing stairs carved by ancient hands into the living rock. The stronghold revealed itself in layers, each turn opening onto new wonders. Pictographs covered the walls, recording centuries of Apache history in images that predated written language. Natural cisterns caught and held rainwater, ensuring survival even in drought. Defensive positions commanded every approach. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was a monument, a statement carved in stone that said, "We were here. We endured. We will not be erased." Taza's dwelling occupied a cave halfway up the main cliff face, sheltered from weather and invisible from below. Inside the space was surprisingly large, the walls covered with ceremonial objects and medicine bundles. The smell of sage and sweetgrass hung heavy in the still air. The old man gestured for them to sit. He moved slowly, building a small fire with ritualistic care, speaking prayers in a language even older than the Apache Ethan knew. When the flames caught, Taza settled across from them and fixed Ethan with eyes that seemed to see past flesh and bone. "You wear guilt like a second skin, Red Brother," Taza said. "Guilt for things you did not do, could not prevent. This is wasteful. Save your strength for the guilt you earn yourself." The words hit harder than Ethan expected. He had no response. Taza turned to Naiche. "Your father knew this day would come. He prepared for it. But first, you must tell me true. Do you seek vengeance or justice?" Naiche took a breath, considering her answer carefully. "I seek truth. If truth brings justice, good. If truth brings only vengeance, I will take that too. But I will not lie about my purpose to make myself seem noble." Taza's face cracked into something almost like a smile. "Good. Liars claim noble purpose. Honest warriors name their hunger." He reached behind him and pulled out a leather tube carefully sealed. "Your father gave this to me 1 week before he died. Said if anything happened to him, I must keep it safe until you were ready." He opened the tube and withdrew a document, old paper carefully preserved. Unrolling it revealed text in 2 languages, Apache and English, written in the careful hand of someone for whom writing was not natural, but necessary. "His will," Naiche whispered. "More than will. Testament. Promise. Prophecy." Taza handed it to her. "Read." Naiche's eyes moved over the words, her lips forming them silently. Ethan watched her expression shift from hope to sorrow to something harder. Determination. "He names me successor," she said. "Not Coda. Me. Says I have shown the qualities of leadership, Courage, wisdom, compassion for our people. Her voice caught. He knew. Even then, he knew Kota would try to take power. He knew more than that, Taza said. He knew how Kota would do it. The cave went very quiet. Outside wind moved through the stone corridors, creating sounds like distant voices. You were there, Naichi said. When Father died, you saw. Taza nodded slowly. I saw. I am ashamed I did nothing. But I am old and Kota's men are many. I chose survival over honor. This is my burden. Tell me, Naichi commanded. Tell me everything. The medicine man stared into the fire, seeing the past in the flames. Your father fell ill sudden. One morning strong, by afternoon shaking, by evening barely breathing. I treated him with all my knowledge. Nothing worked. The symptoms were wrong. Convulsions, foaming at mouth, paralysis creeping from extremities inward. Taza looked at Naichi. You know plants, you know poisons. What makes a body die this way? Hemlock, Naichi said. Water hemlock, the most deadly. Kills in hours, looks like sickness. Yes, and who prepared your father's meals that day? Kota's wife. She cooked for father since our mother died. Taza nodded. I saw her add something to the stew. At the time, I thought nothing. Herbs for flavor, perhaps. But when your father began to die, I remembered, and I saw Kota's face. No grief, only waiting. You saw this and said nothing, Ethan asked, unable to keep the anger from his voice. I am one old man, Taza said. Kota has 20 warriors loyal to him. If I speak, I die. Then who keeps this? He gestured to the will. Who tells truth when time comes? Dead man is just dead. Living coward can become living witness when moment is right. It was brutal calculus, but Ethan understood it. Survival sometimes meant choosing which battles to fight and which to survive. The moment is now, Naichi said. Will you testify before tribal council? I will. Though it may cost me my life, I will speak truth. Taza reached into another bundle and withdrew a second document. And I have this. List of Kota's meetings with Major Cutler, dates, times, locations. My nephew works at Fort Bowie cleaning stables. He is invisible to white men. They speak freely around him. He has recorded everything. Ethan took the document, scanning the meticulous entries. 8 meetings over 6 months. The most recent just 2 weeks ago. Locations alternating between neutral ground and the fort itself. This was conspiracy documented in careful detail. This is gold, Ethan said. But we need more. We need the physical evidence. The rifles, the supplies, something that proves Cutler is arming the renegades. The rifles are hidden in Skeleton Canyon, Naichi said, where we started. Goyawe keeps them there, payment from Kota for the raids. Then we go back, Ethan said. Get the rifles, bring them to the council as proof. That is suicide, Taza said. Skeleton Canyon is Goyawe's stronghold. 20, 30 warriors there any given day. You walk in, you do not walk out. We do not walk in, Naichi said, her eyes sharp with the beginnings of a plan. We wait until they leave. Goyawe must resupply. When he takes his men to raid, the canyon is guarded by only 2, maybe 3. Then we take rifles. When is the next raid? Ethan asked. Taza consulted his nephew's notes. 4 days from now. Supply wagon from Fort Bowie to Fort Apache. Cutler has arranged for Goyawe to attack, take supplies, make it look like Apache aggression. We have 4 days, Naichi said. We rest tomorrow, day after we move to position near Skeleton Canyon. When Goyawe leaves for raid, we take rifles. It was insane. Even with reduced guards, they would be outnumbered and outgunned. But it was also their only chance to get evidence that could expose the entire conspiracy. Taza served them a simple meal of cornmeal cakes and dried fruit. As they ate, he told them more about the state of the band, the growing fear among the people, the warriors who disappeared when they questioned Kota, the slow transformation of their homeland into something unrecognizable. Your father believed in peace, Taza said to Naichi, but he knew peace required strength. Strength to resist those who would abuse our people, whether they be white or Apache. You have that strength, more than Coda will ever have." As darkness fell, Taza showed them to a sheltered alcove where they could sleep. The stone was smooth and cool, worn by centuries of use. Naichi lay down, exhaustion finally claiming her. Ethan sat nearby, keeping watch from habit. "You care for her," Taza said quietly from the cave entrance. It wasn't a question. "I owe her my life," Ethan replied. "That is not what I see in your eyes when you look at her. Debt is cold. What you carry is warm." Ethan had no answer to that. Taza smiled and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Ethan alone with thoughts he wasn't ready to examine. They spent the next day resting and planning. Taza shared his knowledge of Skeleton Canyon's layout, drawing maps in the dirt and describing every approach. Dutch arrived at midday with news. Cutler had doubled the patrols around Apache lands. Coda had sent 6 more warriors to hunt for Naichi. The bounty hunters were closing in now, less than a day behind. "We need to move soon," Dutch said. "Stay here much longer, they'll find you." "Tomorrow," Naichi decided. "We leave at dawn, make for Skeleton Canyon." That night, Naichi and Ethan sat together outside the cave, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The vastness of the desert stretched below them, silver in the moonlight. "When this is over," Naichi said quietly, "when we have stopped Coda and exposed Cutler, what will you do?" Ethan considered the question. 2 weeks ago, he would have said he'd return to his ranch, rebuild, live out his days in solitude. But that life seemed impossibly distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. "I don't know," he admitted. "My ranch is gone. The cavalry doesn't want me. I'm not sure where I fit anymore." "You fit here," Naichi said. "With me. With my people. If you want." The offer hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and danger. To stay would mean choosing a side in a conflict that was far from over. It would mean making enemies of powerful men. It would mean a life of constant struggle. It would also mean belonging to something again, having a purpose beyond mere survival. "I want," Ethan said. Naichi reached over and took his hand, her grip strong and certain. They sat like that as the night deepened, 2 people bound by circumstance, choosing to become something more. The dawn brought Dutch's urgent warning. The bounty hunters had found their trail. Calhoun and his crew were less than 3 hours behind, moving fast and closing the distance. "We run or we fight," Dutch said. "Your choice." Naichi stood checking her weapons with practiced efficiency. "We fight. Running only delays. Better to face them now on ground we choose." They set the ambush in a narrow defile 2 miles from the stronghold. Naichi took high ground on the left. Ethan positioned himself behind cover on the right. Dutch disappeared into shadows, his rifle ready. The bounty hunters appeared exactly when Dutch predicted. 3 hard men on horseback following tracks with professional competence. Calhoun led a man in his mid-40s, with the cold eyes of someone who had killed too many times to count. Behind him rode Reed and Jonas, younger but no less dangerous. They entered the kill zone without suspecting. Naichi fired first, her shot taking Reed's horse in the leg. The animal screamed and went down, throwing its rider. Ethan's shot shattered Jonas's rifle. Dutch's round ricocheted off stone near Calhoun's head, sending the man diving for cover. The battle was brief and brutal. Reed charged Naichi's position on foot. She met him with knife work that was surgical in its precision. 3 moves: disarm, disable, dominate. Reed went down, bleeding but alive. Jonas tried to flank Ethan but walked into Dutch's sights. The old scout put a round through the bounty hunter's shoulder, spinning him around and ending his fight. Calhoun was the dangerous one. He fought smart, using cover, waiting for opportunities. His return fire forced Ethan to stay low. For 5 minutes, they exchanged shots in a deadly chess match. Then Naichi appeared behind Calhoun, moving silent as smoke. She pressed her knife to his throat. "Drop gun," she said quietly. Calhoun complied. Ethan emerged from cover, his Colt trained on the bounty hunter's chest. "Smart choice," Ethan said. "Now you're going to tell us who hired you." Calhoun smiled, showing blood-stained teeth. "You know who hired me, Major William Cutler. $200 for the squaw orders to kill anyone helping her. You have proof. Wire from Tucson. Signed by Cutler himself in my saddlebag." Dutch retrieved the document. Sure enough, there it was. Official United States Army communication offering bounty for Naiche's capture. More evidence to add to their growing case. They bound the 3 hunters and left them with enough water to survive until Dutch could send someone to retrieve them. Mercy, though Ethan suspected Naiche would have preferred a more permanent solution. As they rode away from the ambush site, Naiche looked at Ethan. "You could have killed Calhoun. Clean shot when he was focused on me. Why didn't you?" "Because we're not like them," Ethan said. "We do this right, or we don't do it at all." Naiche nodded slowly, understanding settling across her features. This was the difference between vengeance and justice, between becoming the thing you fought or rising above it. They had 4 days until the raid on the supply wagon, 4 days to position themselves, to wait, to prepare. 4 days until they walked into Skeleton Canyon and either emerged with evidence or died trying. Justice was coming for those who had betrayed the Apache people, and the price would be paid in blood and truth. 4 days crawled by with the slow torture of men waiting for battle. Ethan and Naiche positioned themselves in the hills overlooking Skeleton Canyon, watching the renegade camp through gaps in the rocks. They counted warriors, tracked patrol patterns, memorized the layout until they could navigate it blind. Dutch moved between their position and his network of informants, bringing news that grew steadily worse. Coda had convinced the tribal council to move the trial up by 2 days. They now had 6 days instead of 8. Cutler had tripled patrols around Apache lands, creating a noose that tightened with every passing hour. The supply wagon raid was confirmed for tomorrow at dawn. The night before the raid, they gathered in a sheltered ravine half a mile from the canyon. Dutch had brought Ishta, his Apache wife, whose knowledge of the camp's routines filled in gaps they couldn't observe from distance. "Goyaway keeps the rifles in old mine shaft," Ishta said, drawing in the dirt with a stick. "North wall of canyon behind the big cottonwood. 2 guards always, 1 at entrance, 1 in it." "How many warriors leave for the raid?" Naiche asked. 20, maybe 25. Goyaway takes his best fighters, leaves only old men and young boys to guard camp." Ishta looked at Naiche with eyes that held deep sorrow. "Your father would be proud of what you do, but he would also fear for you. This is very dangerous." "Everything is dangerous now," Naiche replied. "At least this danger serves purpose." Dutch unrolled a rough map he had sketched. "Here's how I see it playing out. The raid happens at dawn. Fort Bowie supply wagon leaves at first light, takes the valley route. Goyaway will hit them here at the narrow pass. 2 hours travel from Skeleton Canyon. So we have maybe 3 hours," Ethan said. "Get in, get the rifles, get out before Goyaway returns." "Less than that," Dutch corrected. "You need time to move the rifles far enough away that they can't immediately recover them. I'd say 2 hours maximum in the camp. 90 minutes would be safer." "What about distraction?" Naiche asked. "Guards will not just let us walk in." "I'll handle that," Dutch said. "I'll set a small fire on the south ridge. Nothing dangerous, just enough smoke to draw attention. When the guards go to investigate, you move." Ishta added, "I will watch from East Ridge. If warriors return early, I signal 3 rifle shots fast." The plan was simple, which meant it had a chance of working. Complex plans fell apart when the first shot was fired. Simple plans could adapt. They slept in shifts, each taking 2-hour watches. When it was Ethan's turn, he sat looking at the stars and thinking about the mathematics of survival. Tomorrow they would walk into a hostile camp, steal military weapons from men who killed without hesitation, and escape with evidence that could bring down a United States Army major and a tribal chief. The odds were not favorable. Naiche woke during his watch, moving silently to sit beside him. "You think we will succeed?" she asked quietly. "I think we'll give it everything we have," Ethan replied. Beyond that, it's in the hands of whatever gods are watching. Apache gods or white gods? Does it matter? Seems to me that if there are gods worth the name, they don't much care about the color of the people praying. Nietzsche was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My father told me once that courage is not the absence of fear. It is fear that knows what must be done and does it anyway." Your father was a wise man? Yes, which is why Kota had to kill him. Wisdom threatens men who rule by force. Dawn came cold and clear. They watched from the ridge as Goyawe assembled his warriors, 23 men on horseback armed with the stolen army rifles. The renegade leader gave orders in rapid Apache, his voice carrying across the canyon. They would hit the wagon hard, take what they could carry, burn the rest, make it look like a major Apache offensive. The war party rode out in a dust cloud, whooping and firing shots into the air. Theatrical, designed to create fear and justify military response. Within 20 minutes, the canyon was quiet again. Only the guards remained, perhaps 8 men total scattered throughout the camp. Dutch moved to position on the south ridge. Ethan and Nietzsche crept down the north slope using scrub and shadow for cover. The sun climbed higher, baking the rocks and creating heat shimmer that distorted distance. At exactly the planned moment, smoke began rising from the south ridge. Not thick, not threatening, but visible. Guards shouted to each other. 5 men jogged toward the smoke to investigate, leaving the camp nearly empty. Ethan and Nietzsche moved. They crossed the open ground in 30 seconds, reaching the cottonwood that marked the mine entrance. One guard stood at the shaft, opening an older warrior who looked bored and half asleep in the morning heat. He never saw Nietzsche coming. She took him from behind, one hand over his mouth, the other applying pressure to his neck. He struggled for perhaps 5 seconds before going limp. She lowered him gently, binding and gagging him with rawhide strips. "Still alive," she whispered to Ethan. "We do this right." They entered the mine shaft. The darkness was absolute after the bright sunlight forcing them to pause while their eyes adjusted. Gradually, shapes emerged. Wooden crates stacked against the walls. Canvas-wrapped bundles, and leaning against the far wall, 15 rifles. New manufacture army, issue the barrels still gleaming with factory oil. The second guard sat deeper in the shaft, maintaining the weapons. He looked up as Ethan and Nietzsche approached his hand, moving toward his rifle. "Don't," Ethan said in Apache, his Colt already drawn and aimed. "We don't want to kill you, but we will if we must." The guard was young, perhaps 19, with the uncertain courage of someone who had never faced death close up. His hand stopped moving. He raised both palms slowly. Nietzsche bound him while Ethan gathered the rifles. They were heavy, awkward to carry in bulk. He managed to sling 6 over his shoulders using rawhide cord. Nietzsche took 5 more. They left 4 unable to carry more without compromising mobility. As they worked, Ethan noticed something else in the corner of the mine. A wooden box marked with the United States Army seal. He pried it open and found documents. Supply manifests, requisition forms, all signed by Major William Cutler, all marked as delivered to Fort Bowie, but obviously diverted here. "Jackpot," Ethan muttered, stuffing the documents inside his shirt. Beside the box lay another bundle, smaller, wrapped in oiled leather and carefully sealed. Ethan unwrapped it and found a ceremonial knife, Apache craftsmanship, the handle carved with symbols of leadership. But something was wrong. The blade edge carried a dark residue, sticky and deliberate. He brought it close and caught the faint smell of bitter almonds mixed with something organic and rotten. His stomach turned. He knew that smell from his cavalry days, from the aftermath of the Camp Grant massacre, when some warriors had chosen poison over capture. Hemlock. Water hemlock, the deadliest plant in Apache territory. Tucked beneath the blade was a folded note written in English on U.S. Army paper for Taza. "Give to Nietzsche before trial by combat. Tell her it belonged to her father, that it will bring his strength. Ensure she uses it. Payment upon confirmation. K." Naichi read over his shoulder. Her breath stopped. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. He planned to kill me even if I won, even if the spirits chose me. He would poison the blade I carried into sacred combat. Ethan carefully rewrapped the knife. We take this, evidence, and we make damn sure Taza knows not to accept any packages from Koda. This is not just murder, Naichi said, her voice hardening. This is desecration. To poison a sacred trial is to spit on everything our people believe. The elders will not forgive this. They had come for rifles and found proof that Koda's corruption went deeper than politics or greed. He was willing to destroy the very foundations of Apache law to maintain power. They exited the mine moving as quickly as the weight of the rifles allowed. The camp remained quiet. The guards were still investigating Dutch's fire, which he had allowed to grow just large enough to seem legitimate. 50 yards from the camp, moving through a dry wash that offered concealment, Naichi suddenly froze. Her head cocked, listening to something Ethan couldn't hear. Then he heard it too. Horses. Many horses, coming from the west from the direction of the raid. Far too soon. They come back, Naichi hissed. Ambush failed. They return early. Dutch's warning shots cracked across the canyon, 3 in rapid succession. Ishta's signal confirmed it. They had perhaps 5 minutes before the war party reached the camp. Run, Ethan said. They ran. The rifles slowed them each step, a battle against weight and balance. Behind them shouts erupted as the returning warriors discovered the theft. Gunshots cracked bullets, whining off rocks around them. The dry wash curved north, following terrain that favored foot travel over horses. They stayed in it, using every bit of cover, pushing their bodies past exhaustion into the realm of pure survival instinct. A bullet hit the rock face inches from Ethan's head. He turned and fired back, not aiming to hit, but to force the pursuers into cover. Naichi did the same, their shots creating a rhythm of suppression that bought seconds. Dutch appeared on the ridge above them, his rifle speaking with methodical precision. One pursuer went down clutching his leg. Another dove for cover. The old scout was buying them time with his life. They climbed out of the wash into boulder country where horses couldn't follow. The warriors would have to pursue on foot now, and that evened the odds. Apache warriors were deadly, but Naichi knew this terrain like her own heartbeat. She led them through passages that seemed impassable, over stones that appeared too steep to climb. The rifles banged against their backs, the weight incredible. Ethan's lungs burned. His vision narrowed to the next handhold, the next step, the next breath. After 30 minutes of brutal climbing, the pursuit sounds faded. They had lost them, at least temporarily. They collapsed in a sheltered overhang, gasping for air. Dutch appeared 10 minutes later, Ishta beside him. The old scout was bleeding from a graze across his shoulder, but his eyes were bright with triumph. "Got what you needed?" he asked. Ethan showed him the documents. Dutch's grin was savage. That'll do just fine." They moved again, heading east now, toward the tribal council grounds. The trial was in 4 days. They had evidence. They had witnesses. They had the truth. Now they just had to survive long enough to present it. The final confrontation was set. In 4 days, they would stand before the tribal council and expose everything. Koda's betrayal, Cutler's corruption, the conspiracy that had cost Chief Nantan his life and threatened to destroy his people's future. They had the evidence. They had the witnesses. They had the truth. Now, they just had to survive long enough to deliver it. The journey took 3 days of hard travel. They moved mostly at night, hiding during the day when Koda's hunters could spot them more easily. Dutch's network of informants passed them between safe houses. Apache families who still remembered Nantan and honored his memory by protecting his daughter. On the 3rd night, camped in a cave 20 miles from the council grounds, Naichi sat staring into the fire with an expression Ethan had never seen before. Not fear, not anger, something else. Uncertainty. "What troubles you?" he asked. "Tomorrow we arrive. Tomorrow I face Kota before the council. Tomorrow I accuse my brother of murder, of treason, of betrayal." She looked at him. "What if they do not believe me? What if the evidence is not enough? Then we fight our way out and try again another day," Ethan said. "You would do this, risk your life again and again for my people." "They're my people too now," Ethan replied. "Your father made me red brother. You made me your ally. I don't abandon family." Naichi reached across the fire and took his hand. "When this is over, when Kota is defeated and Cutler is exposed, I want you to stay, not as ally, not as red brother, as husband, true husband." The proposal hung in the air between them, simple and profound. Ethan had spent 2 years believing he would live and die alone, that he had lost his chance at family when fever took his wife and child. Now this woman, this warrior who had bought his freedom and fought beside him, was offering him a second chance. "Yes," he said, "I'll stay." They made love that night, not with desperate urgency, but with the slow care of two people who had chosen each other deliberately. Afterward they lay together in the firelight, Naichi's head on Ethan's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "My father believed the spirits guide us to where we need to be," she said quietly. "I did not believe this. I thought we make our own path, but meeting you, fighting beside you, I wonder, maybe sometimes the spirits know better than we do." "Maybe," Ethan agreed. "Or maybe we just got lucky. Apache do not believe in luck." "Then what do you believe in?" "I believe in you," Naichi said, simply. Morning brought the final approach to the council grounds. The gathering place sat in a natural amphitheater 3 miles from Fort Bowie neutral ground, where the Chiricahua band had held councils for generations. Already people were arriving, families from across the territory drawn by news of the trial. Some came to see justice, others came to see blood. All came because what happened here would determine the future of their people. Ethan and Naichi rode in openly, making no attempt to hide. Let Kota see them coming. Let him know his sister had returned with allies and evidence. Let him feel fear for once. The crowd parted as they entered, whispers following in their wake. Warriors loyal to Kota moved to block their path, but Dutch appeared with 10 armed men, all veterans who had served with Nantan. The warriors stepped aside. At the center of the grounds, seated in the position of honor, Kota waited. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with the build of a man who had spent his life training for war. His face held the sharp features common to his bloodline, but where Nantan had worn authority with humility, Kota wore it with arrogance. He saw Naichi and smiled. Naichi dismounted, standing tall. "I return because I am not guilty. I return because you are." The crowd murmured. Kota's smile widened. "You accuse me of what crime?" "Murder," Naichi said. "Treason, conspiracy with enemies of our people, selling our homeland for white man's gold." The murmuring grew louder. Kota stood his hand, moving to the knife at his belt. "You have proof of these wild accusations, or just the ravings of desperate woman?" Naichi reached into her pack and pulled out the will. She held it high so all could see. "Our father's will. Written in his hand, witnessed by Taza, the medicine man, naming me as his chosen successor, naming you as unfit to lead." Kota's smile faltered. "Lies. That document is forgery." "Then let Taza speak," Naichi said. "Let him tell the council what he witnessed." Taza emerged from the crowd, supported by Dutch. The old medicine man looked frail, but his voice carried strength when he spoke. "I witnessed Chief Nantan write these words. I watched him sign. I heard him name Naichi as the one to lead after him. And I saw what happened when he died. I saw the poison. I saw who gave it." He pointed at Kota with a trembling hand. "You murdered your father. I kept silent from fear. But I am old. Death comes for me soon anyway. I will not meet the spirits carrying the weight of this lie." The council grounds erupted. Warriors shouted. Women wailed. Kota's face went from confident to furious in the space of a heartbeat. "Old man dreams," he snarled. "His mind is gone. He sees phantoms." "Then explain these." Ethan said, stepping forward with the documents from the mine. Supply manifests, signed by Major Cutler, showing military weapons diverted to renegades, showing your meetings with him, showing the price you agreed to for selling your people's land. He handed the documents to the head elder, a man named Goyathlai, who had served on the council for 30 years. The elder read slowly, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is true," Goyathlai asked Koda. "You meet with cavalry commander, you sell our homeland." Koda's hand dropped to his knife. For a moment, Ethan thought he might attack right there in front of everyone. Then, the tribal chief seemed to gather himself. "I invoke ancient right," he said. "Trial by combat. I challenge the accused. Let the spirits decide who speaks truth." The crowd went silent. Trial by combat was old law rarely invoked but never denied. If Koda won, Nietzsche would die, and all accusations would die with her. If Nietzsche won, Koda would be proven guilty and face execution. Goyathlai looked troubled, but nodded. "It is your right. Nietzsche, do you accept?" Ethan started to protest, but Nietzsche put her hand on his arm. "I accept," she said. The debt of blood had come due, and tomorrow it would be paid in full. The combat would take place at dawn. Ancient law required it, a symbolic battle between darkness and light, between lies and truth. The crowd dispersed to temporary camps around the council grounds, but few slept. Fires burned through the night, and voices carried on the wind, arguing, praying, remembering. Ethan sat with Nietzsche in a shelter Dutch had secured, watching her prepare her weapons with ritualistic care. She sharpened her knife until the edge could split a hair. She oiled the leather bindings on her shirt, ensuring full range of motion. She stretched each muscle group, testing for weakness or injury. "You don't have to do this," Ethan said, though he knew the words were futile. "We have evidence. The council could rule based on that alone." "Koda invoked sacred law," Nietzsche replied without looking up from her work. "If I refuse, I am coward. Everything we fought for becomes worthless. The evidence means nothing if I will not stand behind it with my life." "He's bigger than you, stronger. Trained since childhood for this." "Yes." Nietzsche tested her knife's balance, then slid it into its sheath. "But he fights for power. I fight for truth. This gives me advantage he cannot understand." Dutch entered the shelter carrying food and water. "Eat," he commanded. "You'll need your strength." Nietzsche ate mechanically, fueling her body without tasting. Ethan watched the methodical way she prepared, recognizing the mind of a warrior settling into the calm before violence. He had seen it in cavalry soldiers before major engagements, that space where fear transformed into focus. "There are no rules in trial by combat," Dutch said quietly. "First blood means nothing. Submission or death. Those are the only outcomes." "I understand," Nietzsche said. "Koda will not show mercy if he gains the advantage. I would not expect him to." Dutch nodded, satisfied she understood the stakes. He left to make his own preparations to ensure their escape route if everything went wrong. Alone again, Nietzsche finally looked at Ethan. In the firelight, her face showed the full weight of what tomorrow meant. Not just her life, but the future of her people. The legacy of her father. Everything balanced on the edge of a blade. "If I fall," she said quietly, "you must still expose Cutler. The documents, the witnesses, all of it. My death cannot silence the truth." "You won't fall. But if I do..." Ethan moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. "If you fall, I'll finish what we started. I'll make sure Cutler pays. I'll make sure your people know what you died fighting for, and then I'll put a bullet in Koda's skull, sacred law or not." Nietzsche smiled slightly. "This would dishonor you, make you criminal. I don't care. Some debts can only be paid in blood." She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat that way through the long hours of night, saying nothing, because everything important had already been said. When the sky began to pale in the east, Nietzsche stood and began the final preparations. Taza appeared at the shelter entrance, carrying bundles of sage and sweetgrass. Without asking permission, he entered, and began to prepare a blessing ceremony. He lit the sacred plants using the smoke to cleanse Naichi's weapons, her body, her spirit. As he worked, he chanted in the old language words that predated the Apache themselves, borrowed from peoples who had walked these lands when the world was young. Ethan didn't understand the words, but he felt their power. Naichi stood still, accepting the blessing with closed eyes, her breathing slow and deep. When Taza finished, he looked at her with eyes that had seen 7 decades of joy and sorrow. "Your father taught you to be strong," he said, "but remember also to be wise. Strength alone can be defeated. Wisdom finds the path strength cannot see." Naichi nodded. "I remember, grandfather." The sun broke the horizon. The time had come. The combat circle had been prepared in the center of the council grounds, a space 50 feet across, marked with stones. 4 elders stood at the cardinal points, witnesses to ensure sacred law was followed. The crowd gathered in tiers around the circle, 200 people silent and tense. Koda entered from the east, stripped to the waist, his torso covered in traditional war paint. He carried a long knife bone handled and clearly ancient, a weapon that had tasted blood many times before. He moved with the confidence of a man who had never lost a fight, his muscles rolling under bronzed skin. Naichi entered from the west, wearing her buckskin shirt and leggings, her father's ceremonial knife in her hand. She was taller than most women, but still gave away 4 inches and 40 pounds to her brother. The physical mismatch was obvious to everyone watching. Koda smiled when he saw her. "Last chance, sister. Surrender now. Beg forgiveness. I might let you live as slave instead of corpse." "I would rather die free than live as coward," Naichi replied. Goyathle, the head elder, stepped into the circle. He raised his hands and the crowd fell completely silent. "We gather under sacred law," he intoned. "Combat to determine truth when evidence conflicts. The spirits will guide the blades, the righteous will stand, the guilty will fall. There are no rules save this fight until one yields or dies. Do you both accept these terms?" "I accept," Koda said. "I accept," Naichi echoed. Goyathle stepped back. "Then let the spirits judge." The combat began not with a rush, but with circling. Koda moved left, testing Naichi's reactions. She mirrored him, maintaining distance, watching his footwork. Both were trained fighters, and both understood that the first exchange would set the tone for everything that followed. Koda struck first, a probing thrust aimed at Naichi's midsection. She deflected it, the blades ringing together. He followed with a backhand slash that would have opened her throat, but she ducked under it and retreated 3 steps. The crowd murmured. First blood to neither, but Koda's aggression was obvious. He pressed the attack using his reach advantage to force Naichi backward. His blade work was textbook perfect, each strike flowing into the next, creating patterns that left few openings. Naichi defended her blade, moving in tight arcs, deflecting rather than blocking, conserving energy. Ethan watched from outside the circle, his hands clenched so tight his nails drew blood from his palms. Every strike Koda threw made his heart stop. Every deflection Naichi managed released it again. 3 minutes into the fight, Koda changed tactics. Instead of blade work, he rushed forward and grappled using his size to bear Naichi to the ground. They hit hard, dust billowing. Koda's knife descended toward her throat. Naichi brought her knee up, catching him in the ribs. The blow had her full strength behind it. Koda grunted his strike, deflecting. Naichi twisted, throwing him off balance, and rolled away. Both came to their feet, breathing hard. First blood went to Koda. His blade had opened a shallow cut across Naichi's shoulder during the grapple. Red stained her buckskin shirt. Koda's smile widened. "You bleed, sister. Soon you die." Naichi said nothing. She shifted her stance, and Ethan recognized what she was doing. She was done defending. Now she would attack. She came in fast, her blade a blur of motion. High strike, low strike, thrust, slash, creating combinations that forced Koda backward. He defended well, his training evident, but for the first time doubt flickered across his face. His smaller sister was not fighting like a woman. She was fighting like a warrior who had spent her life preparing for this exact moment. The blade work continued for another 5 minutes, neither gaining clear advantage. Both were bleeding now from minor cuts. Both were tiring, their movements slower, their breathing labored. Then Kota made his mistake. He lunged forward with all his strength, committing fully to a thrust aimed at Naichi's heart. It was a killing blow if it landed, but Naichi had been waiting for it, baiting him into overcommitting. She sidestepped at the last possible instant, and Kota's momentum carried him past her. Her knife flashed, opening a deep cut along his ribs. He roared in pain and spun, slashing wildly. The blade caught Naichi's arm, cutting deep. She gasped, but didn't retreat. They stood facing each other, both wounded, both knowing the fight was entering its final phase. Whoever fell first would not rise again. Kota attacked with renewed fury, his pride wounded more than his body. He abandoned technique in favor of raw aggression, trying to overwhelm Naichi through sheer force. His blade came again and again, each strike powerful enough to kill. Naichi gave ground, but it was controlled retreat, drawing him deeper into the pattern she wanted. She was reading him now, anticipating his attacks, seeing the telegraph in his shoulders before his blade moved. Ethan saw it happening and understood what she was doing. She was letting him exhaust himself, letting his rage burn away his discipline, waiting for the moment when strength would falter and leave him exposed. That moment came when Kota threw a wild overhead strike, putting everything he had into one final killing blow. Naichi didn't deflect. She stepped inside his reach, too close for his long blade to be effective. Her knife punched into his side, below the ribs, angling up. Not a killing blow, but a crippling one. Kota's eyes went wide with shock and pain. His knife fell from nerveless fingers. Naichi swept his legs, dropping him to his knees. She kicked his fallen blade away and stood behind him, her knife at his throat. The combat had lasted 18 minutes. It felt like hours. The crowd was absolutely silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped, waiting to see what came next. "Yield," Naichi said, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying in the stillness. "Yield and confess your crimes." Kota laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. "Kill me or let me go, sister. I will not give you satisfaction of confession. The spirits have judged. You kneel. I stand. Truth has won. Truth." Kota spat blood. "There is no truth, only power. Our father was weak, clinging to old ways while the white man took everything. I made deal to save our people, to get them wealth and safety. You call this crime. You call selling our homeland safety." Naichi's blade pressed tighter. "You call murder of our father's strength. He would have led us to extinction. Peaceful cooperation with white men who want us dead or broken. I gave us chance to survive. By becoming like them, by betraying everything father stood for." Kota tried to rise, but the wound in his side dropped him back to his knees. "You understand nothing. Sentiment will not save our people. Only gold, only guns, only deals with those who have power." From outside the circle a voice called out, "Quite a show, Kota, though not the outcome we discussed." Everyone turned. Major William Cutler stood at the edge of the grounds, flanked by 20 cavalry soldiers in formation. His uniform was parade ground perfect, despite the dust of hard riding. His hand rested casually on his saber hilt, the posture of a man completely confident in his authority. The crowd erupted in angry murmurs. Warriors reached for weapons. Cutler's soldiers raised their rifles in response. The situation balanced on the edge of massacre. Kota's face showed a flash of desperate hope. "Major Cutler, tell them our agreement was for the good of the Apache people." "Agreement." Cutler's expression was coolly professional. "I have no idea what you're referring to. I came here because reports reached Fort Bowie of an illegal gathering. Apache warriors armed and assembled. My duty is to investigate potential threats to settlers." "Liar! Nietzsche stepped forward, still holding her bloodied knife. You made deal with my brother, sold our land to railroad, armed renegades to create false raids. Cutler smiled thinly. These are serious accusations, miss. Do you have proof? Or just the desperate claims of a woman who murdered her own father and blamed her brother? The crowd's anger shifted, confused. Cutler was smooth-practiced at this. His words carried the weight of military authority of civilization itself. Ethan stepped into the circle, pulling the documents from inside his shirt. How about these major supply manifests showing rifles diverted from Fort Bowie to Skeleton Canyon, all bearing your signature? Forgeries, Cutler said without hesitation, obviously fabricated by criminals. And this, Nietzsche held up the poisoned ceremonial knife. The blade Coda planned to give me through Taza, treated with hemlock poison, meant to kill me during sacred combat even if I won fairly. She unfolded the note. The instructions are written on United States Army correspondence paper, signed with your initial. For the first time, Cutler's composure flickered. His eyes went to the knife, to the note. Just for a second, calculation replaced confidence. More forgeries? My correspondence paper could have been stolen by whom, Major? A new voice cut through the tension. A man in a dusty civilian suit pushed through the crowd. He was perhaps 50, lean and weathered, with steel-gray hair and eyes that carried the patient certainty of someone who had spent years building a case. He pulled back his coat to reveal a badge. United States Marshal. Thomas Garrett, Federal Marshal out of Tucson. I've been investigating reports of military corruption in this territory for 8 months, Major Cutler. Funny thing about investigations, they take time, but they're thorough. Cutler's hand tightened on his saber hilt. Marshal Garrett, I wasn't aware the Marshal Service had jurisdiction over military matters. We do when military matters involve theft of federal property, conspiracy to defraud the government, and accessory to murder. Garrett produced a leather folder. I have sworn testimony from 3 Fort Bowie quartermasters documenting your weapons diversions. Bank records showing deposits from the Southwestern Railroad Company totaling $73,000. And as of yesterday, I have a very cooperative witness named Goya Awe, who's quite willing to detail your entire operation in exchange for leniency. The color drained from Cutler's face. Major William Cutler, you are under arrest for conspiracy theft of military property corruption and attempted murder. Federal charges. You'll be tried in Tucson. Cutler's hand moved toward his saber. 3 rifle hammers cocked simultaneously as Garrett's deputies stepped forward, weapons ready. Don't, Garrett said quietly. I'd prefer to take you in alive, but dead works too. For a long moment, Cutler stood frozen. Then his shoulders sagged. The mask of authority crumbled, revealing the small, frightened man beneath. The cavalry soldiers looked at each other uncertain. Their lieutenant, a young man named James Howard, who Ethan vaguely recognized from his own service days, stepped forward. Men, lower your weapons, Howard ordered. His voice carried the firmness of someone who had just made a difficult choice. Major Cutler is no longer in command. We serve the law and the Constitution, not criminals. The rifles came down. 2 deputies moved to secure Cutler, binding his hands with iron manacles. As they led him toward their horses, he looked back at Coda, still kneeling in the combat circle, and laughed bitterly. You fool, you stupid, grasping fool. Did you really think I'd honor our agreement, that I'd pay you anything once I had what I wanted? His voice rose, cracking with rage. Your people get nothing. No gold, no protection, just reservations and poverty. And you sold them for promises written in smoke. Coda's face twisted with rage and despair. He understood now that he had been used, that Cutler had never intended to honor their deal. He had been a pawn in a game he thought he was playing as a king. Goyathle stepped into the circle, his ancient face grave. The combat is decided. Nietzsche stands. Coda kneels. The spirits have spoken. He looked at Coda. You have brought shame upon your father's name. You have betrayed your people. You have murdered your chief and conspired with enemies. What do you say before we pass judgment? Koda looked at Naichi still standing behind him with knife at his throat. For just a moment his mask cracked and Ethan saw the brother beneath the tyrant. Young, afraid, lost. "I wanted to protect them," Koda said quietly. "Our people. I saw the future, saw how the white man swallows everything. I thought if we had gold, if we had weapons, we could negotiate from strength." He closed his eyes. "Father's way was dying. I tried to find new way. I was wrong." It was not quite a confession, but it was admission, more than they had dared hope for. Naichi lowered her knife. "The council will decide your fate. I have proven my innocence. I have exposed the conspiracy. Now I leave justice to those wiser than me." She stepped away from Koda. Warriors moved to take him into custody, binding him with leather cords. He did not resist. The fight had gone out of him. Goyathle raised his hands. "The council will deliberate, but first we acknowledge what has been proven this day. Chief Nantan was murdered. Koda conspired with white officer to sell our land. Naichi has spoken truth. The spirits have confirmed this through combat." He turned to Naichi. "Your father named you his successor. You have proven yourself worthy through courage and wisdom. The council will vote, but I believe I speak for all when I say you are our chief now." The crowd erupted, not in anger, but in affirmation. Voices raised in traditional songs of welcome for new leadership. Women ululated, men fired rifles into the air in celebration. Naichi stood in the center of the circle covered in blood and dust, and wept, not from pain or fear, but from relief. The burden she had carried for 6 months, the weight of her father's murder and her people's future, had been lifted. Truth had won. Justice had been served. Ethan moved to her side, not touching, but present. She turned and fell into his arms, and he held her while she cried, this warrior woman who had fought so hard for so long. "It's done," he whispered. "It's over." "No," she said, pulling back to look at him. "It is not over. It is beginning." She was right. The trial was over, but the work of leading her people, of navigating the treacherous ground between tradition and change, between Apache sovereignty and American expansion, that work was just starting. But they would face it together. Red Brother and Chief Naichi. Allies, partners, family. The debt of blood had been paid. Now came the harder work of building peace. The council deliberated through the night. Ethan sat with Dutch outside the circle of elders, listening to voices rise and fall in debate. Some argued for immediate execution. Others called for exile. A few, mostly older warriors who had served with Koda in younger days, pleaded for mercy tempered with justice. Naichi did not participate. Apache law prevented the accuser from sitting in judgment. Instead, she waited in the shelter with Taza, allowing her wounds to be cleaned and bound. The cut on her arm had been deep, requiring 15 careful stitches made with bone needle and sinew thread. She bore the pain without sound, her face stoic. "Your father would have been proud," Taza said as he worked. "Not just of your victory, but of your restraint. You could have killed Koda, many would have, but you chose to let justice decide rather than vengeance." "Vengeance would have been easier," Naichi admitted. "But father taught me that easy choices often lead to hard consequences." Dawn broke over the council grounds for the second time. Goyathle emerged from the elders' circle, his face showing the weight of the decision they had reached. The crowd gathered silent and expectant. "We have decided," Goyathle announced. "Koda, son of Nantan, brother to our new chief, you are found guilty of murder, treason, and conspiracy against your people. The punishment for these crimes is death." Koda, bound and kneeling, showed no reaction. He had known this outcome was coming. "However," Goyathle continued, "Chief Naichi has spoken on your behalf. She asks that we remember you were once a warrior who fought for your people, even if your methods became twisted. She asks that we grant you the dignity of choosing your own death in the old way." The old way. Trial by ordeal in the wilderness, alone and unarmed. A warrior's death, but a lonely one. Koda would be taken deep into the Chiricahua Mountains and released with nothing but a knife. If he survived 10 days and returned, his crimes would be forgiven. No one in living memory had survived. Koda looked at Nietzsche, surprise flickering across his face. "Why grant me this mercy? Because you are still my brother," Nietzsche replied. "Because somewhere beneath the ambition and the fear, the boy who hunted with our father still exists. If that boy can find his way home, then perhaps redemption is possible." Koda bowed his head. "I will not return, sister, but I thank you for the chance to die as a warrior rather than a traitor." 4 warriors led him away into the mountains. Ethan watched him go, this man who had set so much tragedy in motion, now walking toward almost certain death, with more dignity than he had shown in life. "You think he'll survive?" Dutch asked quietly. "No," Ethan replied. But she gave him the chance to die, believing he might. 3 days later, a cavalry detail arrived from Fort Bowie. Lieutenant Howard led the detail accompanied by Marshal Garrett. They came not as conquerors but as witnesses to justice. Major William Cutler had been transported to Tucson, where a federal judge would hear the case. The evidence was overwhelming. Supply manifests showing diverted weapons. Testimony from soldiers who had questioned the orders but followed them anyway. The documents Ethan had recovered from Skeleton Canyon, and Cutler's own confession made in front of 200 witnesses. "The trial will be a formality," Garrett told Ethan and Nietzsche. "He'll hang, probably within 2 months." "Good," Nietzsche said simply. Garrett produced a leather folder. "There's more. The investigation into Fort Bowie uncovered a network of corruption going back 5 years. Cutler wasn't working alone. 3 other officers, 2 civilian contractors, and a territorial official were all taking bribes from railroad companies. They've all been arrested." "Will this stop the railroad?" Nietzsche asked. Garrett's expression turned grim. "No, but it will slow them down. Give your people time to negotiate better treaties to secure better terms. The federal government is embarrassed by this scandal. They'll be more careful about appearing fair, at least for a while." It wasn't a victory, but it was time. Time was something the Apache had precious little of these days. Lieutenant Howard stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Chief Nietzsche, I want to apologize. I served under Cutler for 2 years. I should have seen what he was doing. I should have reported it." "You were a young officer," Nietzsche replied, "following orders from superior. This is what soldiers do." "It's what cowards do," Howard said. "Brave men question when orders are wrong. Your father taught Mr. McAllister that lesson. I wish I'd learned it sooner." "You learn it now," Nietzsche said. "This is what matters." After the cavalry detail departed, preparations began for the ceremony that would formally install Nietzsche as chief. Runners had gone out to neighboring bands, inviting them to witness the transition of power. Over the next week, Apache from across the territory arrived. Chiricahua, Mescalero, even a few Jicarilla from the north. More than 400 people gathered, the largest assembly in 5 years. The ceremony took place under the full moon in accordance with tradition. A great fire burned in the center of the grounds, casting shadows that danced across the assembled faces. The elders formed a circle around Nietzsche, each one speaking blessings and offering wisdom. Taza performed the sacred rites, marking Nietzsche's forehead with clay and ash symbols of the earth she would protect and the trials she had overcome. He placed on her shoulders a blanket woven with symbols of leadership, the same blanket her father had worn. "You stand where your father stood," Taza intoned. "You carry the weight he carried. You speak for those who cannot speak. You protect those who cannot protect themselves. You are no longer Nietzsche daughter, you are Nietzsche chief. Do you accept this burden?" "I accept," she said, her voice steady and strong. The crowd erupted in affirmation, voices raised in traditional songs that had welcomed new chiefs for generations beyond counting. Women danced, men fired rifles into the air, children laughed and ran between the adults, celebrating without fully understanding, but caught up in the joy nonetheless. Ethan stood at the edge of the circle watching. Dutch appeared beside him, offering a flask of whiskey. Hell of a woman you've tied yourself to, Dutch observed. Yeah, Ethan agreed, taking a drink. She is. You ready for what comes next? Being married to a chief isn't like being married to a regular woman. Her people come first. Always. I know. And you're okay with that? Ethan thought about the question seriously. 2 months ago, he had been a broken man, hiding on a failed ranch, wanting nothing more than to be left alone. Now he was about to marry the chief of an Apache band, become part of a people not his own, commit himself to a cause that would bring danger and hardship and constant struggle. Yeah, he said, I'm okay with that. The wedding took place 3 days after the installation ceremony. It combined Apache traditions with a few elements Ethan insisted on creating something unique. Not quite Apache, not quite white, but something that belonged to both. The ceremony began at sunset. Naichi wore traditional dress buckskin decorated with beadwork that had taken a dozen women 3 days to complete. Ethan wore his cleanest shirt and pants, but over them he wore an Apache vest that Ishta had made decorated with symbols of the eagle and the wolf. Brotherhood and loyalty. Taza presided, speaking first in Apache and then in English, ensuring all present could understand the vows being made. Ethan and Naichi stood facing each other, their hands bound together with a woven cord symbol of lives intertwining. Do you, Ethan McAllister, called Red Brother, take this woman as your wife? Do you promise to stand beside her in times of plenty and times of want? Do you promise to honor her path even when it diverges from your own? Do you promise to be her partner, her ally, her family? I do, Ethan said. Do you, Naichi, daughter of Nantan, chief of the Chiricahua, take this man as your husband? Do you promise to stand beside him in times of peace and times of war? Do you promise to honor his heart even when your duties pull you elsewhere? Do you promise to be his partner, his ally, his family? I do, Naichi said. Taza unwound the cord and replaced it with 2 matching bracelets woven from leather and horsehair, marked with symbols representing their union. The spirits witness this bond, Taza pronounced. Separate paths converge. Different peoples find unity, walk together with honor, building bridges where others see only walls. They kissed and the crowd cheered. The celebration that followed lasted deep into the night. There was food more than Ethan had seen in months. Deer and rabbit roasted over open fires, corn cakes and mesquite bean bread, wild berries preserved from the summer harvest. People ate and danced and told stories, the kind of gathering that reminded everyone why community mattered, why fighting to preserve it was worth the cost. Later, in the privacy of the shelter that had been prepared for them, Naichi and Ethan lay together in the darkness. The sounds of celebration continued outside, but muted now, winding down, as exhaustion claimed even the most dedicated revelers. "What are you thinking?" Naichi asked. "I'm thinking about the future," Ethan replied. "About what comes next. What do you see? Trouble. The railroad will come eventually, no matter how many corrupt officers we expose. More settlers, more pressure to give up land. The government will make new demands, new treaties that look fair, but carry poison hidden in the fine print." "Yes," Naichi agreed. "All this is true. So why do you smile?" "Because we'll face it together. You, me, Dutch, Taza, your people, we'll adapt, we'll survive. We'll find ways to keep what matters while changing what we must." He pulled her closer. "Your father did it. Maintained peace without surrendering identity. You can too." "I hope you are right, Red Brother." "I know I am, because you're stronger than you think and smarter than Coda ever gave you credit for. You'll make mistakes, every leader does, but you'll learn from them. That's what makes the difference." They fell silent, holding each other as the night deepened and the celebration fires burned down to coals. 6 months passed. The band wintered in the traditional grounds, hunting and preparing for spring. Naichi proved to be a capable chief, different from her father, but no less effective. She maintained the peace treaty with Fort Bowie, now under the command of Lieutenant Howard, who had been promoted to captain after Cutler's conviction. She negotiated new terms for land use, giving up some territory in exchange for guaranteed water rights and hunting grounds. Not everyone was happy with her leadership. Some of the older warriors grumbled about taking orders from a woman. A few young men hungry for glory left to join renegade bands in Mexico. But most stayed. Most believed. Ethan found his place in the new order. He was not chief, not warrior, not quite elder. He was advisor, translator, bridge between worlds. When white settlers had questions, they came to him. When Apache had concerns about dealing with the cavalry, they sought his counsel. It was strange work being the man in the middle, but it was important work. Dutch and Ishta built a small cabin on the edge of the band's territory, close enough to help, but far enough for privacy. The old scout spent his days teaching tracking skills to the young warriors, passing on knowledge that might otherwise be lost. Taza grew frailer with each passing month, but his mind remained sharp. He trained 3 younger medicine men in the old ways, ensuring the traditions would continue after he was gone. On a warm spring morning, Naichi called Ethan to the council fire. She wore an expression he couldn't quite read. Nervous, excited, afraid. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing is wrong." She took his hand and placed it on her belly. "Everything is right. We are going to have a child." The news hit Ethan like a physical blow. A child. His child. Their child. A life that would walk between 2 worlds from birth, carrying both Apache and white blood, belonging fully to neither, but potentially bridging both. "Are you happy?" Naichi asked, suddenly uncertain. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Yes. Terrified, but yes, very happy." "I am terrified too," she admitted. "This world we bring child into it is not safe, not certain. I fear for what future holds." "Every parent fears for their child's future," Ethan said. "But we'll raise this baby to be strong, to be wise, to honor both sides of their heritage. That's all we can do." The child was born in the fall, a girl who entered the world screaming her fury at the injustice of cold air and bright light. She was healthy, perfect, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin. They named her Ayana Eternal Blossom, a name that worked in both Apache and Apache and English. Taza blessed her with smoke and prayers, welcoming her to the band and to the world. As Ethan held his daughter for the first time, feeling the weight of her in his arms, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. 6 months ago, he had been a prisoner, tied to a post, waiting to die. Now he was a husband, soon to be a father, part of a community that had claimed him as one of their own. The debt of blood that had bound him to Naichi had transformed into something else entirely. Family, purpose, home. The future was uncertain. The challenges facing the Apache people were immense and growing. The railroad would come. More settlers would arrive. The pressure to conform, to surrender, to disappear would increase with each passing year. But they would face it together. Chief Naichi and Red Brother, warriors and wisdom keepers. Parents raising a child who embodied the hope that 2 peoples could find common ground, that the barriers between them were not insurmountable, that love and honor and courage could build bridges where politics built walls. 5 years later, Ethan stood on the same ridge where he and Naichi had first planned the raid on Skeleton Canyon. Below him, the band's winter camp spread out in organized rows. More than 300 people now, as refugees from other bands, had sought the relative safety and prosperity Naichi's leadership provided. Ayana played near the shelter, teaching her younger brother the correct way to string a small bow. At 5, she was already showing the determination that defined both her parents. Her brother, 2-year-old Nathan, named for Nantan, showed more interest in dismantling the bow than learning to use it. Naichi emerged from the council shelter where she had been meeting with representatives from 3 other bands. The meetings were becoming more frequent as Apache leaders recognized that unity was their only hope against the forces arrayed against them. She climbed the ridge to stand beside Ethan, slipping her hand into his. "The Mescalero chief agrees," she said. "We will present a unified proposal to the territorial governor, one voice instead of many, stronger together." "Your father would be proud," Ethan said. "I hope so. Sometimes I wonder if I am doing enough, if I am leading them well." "You're doing more than well. Look at them." He gestured at the camp below. Fed, safe, maintaining their traditions while adapting to new realities. That's leadership. A rider appeared on the eastern trail, moving fast. As he drew closer, Ethan recognized Dutch, who had been scouting near Fort Bowie. The old scout dismounted and climbed the ridge, his face serious. "News," he said without preamble. "Cutler hanged yesterday in Tucson. Federal judge made a show of it, invited reporters from San Francisco and Denver. They're calling it the biggest military corruption case in territorial history." Nietzsche nodded slowly. "Good. His death brings no one back, but it sends message. Corruption has consequences." "There's more," Dutch continued. "The territorial governor is coming here, wants to meet with you personally, talk about new treaty terms." "When?" "2 weeks." After Dutch left to see to his horse, Nietzsche stood silent, looking out over her people. The weight of leadership sat heavy on her shoulders, but she carried it without complaint. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "Taking this burden. Every day," she admitted. "But I also celebrate it every day. This is my purpose, Ethan. This is why the spirits guided me to you in that renegade camp. So we could stand here together raising our children, protecting our people, building something that honors the past while facing the future." She turned to him, taking both his hands. "I bought you to save myself. But in saving myself, I found something greater. Family, purpose, legacy. Our children will tell the story of how we fought for what mattered, how we refused to surrender our identity even as we adapted to survive. How partnership built on respect and courage can bridge divides that others claim cannot be crossed." Ethan kissed her forehead. "It's a good story, worth fighting for." "Yes," Nietzsche agreed. "It is." Below them, Ayanna's laughter rang out as Nathan finally succeeded in stringing the bow, even if he had it backwards. The sound carried on the wind, pure and joyful. The sound of children who knew they were safe, who understood they were loved, who believed the future held possibility rather than just struggle. The debt of blood had been paid years ago. What remained was the work of living, of building, of creating something worthy of the sacrifices made to protect it. Ethan McAllister, former cavalry sergeant, dishonorably discharged and broken, had found redemption in the most unlikely place. Naichi, daughter of Chief Nantan, had claimed her birthright and proven herself worthy of it. Together they had built a life that honored both their histories while forging something new. The challenges ahead were real. The railroad was coming. Settlers were spreading. The old ways were fading. But they would face it all with courage, with wisdom, with the strength that came from standing together. The sun set over the Chiricahua Mountains, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. Smoke from cook fires rose in gentle spirals. Voices carried on the evening air, speaking Apache and English in equal measure, the sound of a community that had found a way to endure. This was the legacy. Not victory over all enemies, not preservation of everything exactly as it had been, but survival with dignity, adaptation without surrender. A people who had faced destruction and chosen instead to transform, to evolve, to persist. And at the center of it all, two people who had met as strangers in a desperate moment, bound by a transaction that became a partnership, that became a love, that became a family, that became a future worth fighting for. The debt of blood had given them to each other. What they chose to do with that gift would echo through generations. As the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, Ethan and Naichi walked down from the ridge together, heading home to their children, to their people, to the life they had built from nothing but courage and determination, and an absolute refusal to surrender what mattered most. The story that began with chains and ended with freedom. with blood spilled and lives saved. With a woman who bought a man and found a partner, with a man who was saved and became a savior, the debt was paid. The legacy was secured, and the future, uncertain as it was, belonged to those brave enough to fight for it.